Edward Pressman, thank you for all the great movies that you've produced over the years. For aspiring producers who want to make uncompromising projects, what is your advice?
Persistence.
Okay. Just to be persistent, to never let go, to always fight the good fight?
Yeah, I mean, it's never easy.
It's never easy, okay. Did you ever have, were you ever certain of a project's success?
I'd say almost every film we start making, I think, will be a success. It's not always the case.
Okay. So what do you think about the property projects dominating the market today?
You're talking about the comic book movies?
Yeah, stuff like that. It's Star Wars, whatever.
Yeah. Hollywood has always had its division between the big studio movies and the smaller films, and I think it's just exaggerated now more than it's ever been. But I think it's compensated to some degree by the multiple, channels of distribution for smaller films, which would not have been seen in the past because there was no vehicle. When we started making films, there were basically 5 companies that distributed everything. The independent movement didn't exist, and now there's a plethora of ways to get a film out there. It doesn't necessarily break through the media traffic. It gets made, and sometimes they, reach an audience and catch on. And
I guess it's kind of hard to know, huh?
Have a life, yeah.
So back in the day, how would Brian De Palma pitch a project to you?
Brian was a friend from New York, and he had done a film called Greetings and Hi Mom, which were low budget, very independent movies. And I was a fan and a friend, and Brian then went on to do a studio movie called Get to Know Your Rabbit at Warner Brothers. And he had a very unhappy experience. He called me and said, I've got these 2 projects under option to Warner's. I'd do anything to get out. And asked if I could find a way to get the properties free. And we were able to do that, and then had Sisters and Phantom of the Paradise, and decided, not because of the film I preferred, but because it was simpler to start with Sisters and work with a team of actors and friends who all knew each other, from Margot Kidder to Jennifer Salt, to Brian and Charles Durning. So there was an immediate ability to bring it together and do the film for a low budget. And the film opened fairly weekly, but then at that time there were drive-in theaters, and the drive-in theaters were a very substantial business, and all of a sudden the film took on a life that wouldn't have existed without the drive-in audience, which was more exploitational. So we did that, and then started to do Phantom of the Paradise with the same company that distributed Sisters. I remember 2 weeks before we started to shoot Phantom, they asked to cut the budget by $5 million, and we couldn't see a way to do that. So we were fortunate enough to meet an independent financier in Gus Byrne and partner Gabe Katska, who, by a great fluke of luck, agreed to come in and take over the financing of the film. So we did it independently, sold it to Fox after it was made, which at that time was not a common thing.
Yeah, well, I just bought the Criterion recently of Sisters, and it looks fantastic. I think it remains a very strong film. Another film that you made that I believe is very strong and remains relevant today is Talk Radio, and it was very prophetic in a sense. And I was wondering to get your thoughts on deplatforming of certain personalities on the internet right now, and what your thoughts on that are. Well, just like, like on talk radio, you had a shock jock, and now you see people like Alex Jones losing their platform. And I was wondering what you think about people like that losing their platform nowadays.
Yeah, well, it was based on a true incident and a real figure who was murdered. There was a book called Talk to Death about him, and Oliver Stone decided to, together with us, to combine that book about the true incident with the Eric Bogosian play, Talk Radio, which was at the Public Theater, and created the movies from both sources. It's timely now, but it was timely then too.
It's true. You had Rush Limbaugh and guys like that really dominating the scene back then. I was wondering, what edgy scripts that you produced did you almost pass on?
Think of more of the films I wish came to fruition that we wanted to make.
Yeah. Like Bad Lieutenant was very sensational material, and I want to thank you personally for making that. It's a fantastic film. It's one of my favorite films.
All right. Yeah, I remember when we were doing Sisters, Brian introduced us to George Lucas, who was working on a film, what was it called? It was called Pressman.
Oh, yeah.
And Scorsese was working on a film, ultimately became Mean Streets, and I had to choose between Cruisin', which became American Graffiti, the film that became Mean Streets, and Brian's film Sisters. Since closest to Brian and the people involved, I went with that film. So I guess missing out on Mean Streets and American Graffiti were unfortunate, but you could only do one.
Oh, well, I really like Sisters personally, so I think you still made a good decision there. What was your favorite decade to produce in?
I got no favorite decade.
You got no favorite decade?
This decade.
This decade? Okay. Which series director that you've worked with, like Brian De Palma or Oliver Stone, perhaps? Which director had that was very serious, had like a funny side that we may not know of?
Well, I think most of them, from Terry Mallick to obviously Brian, and certainly Oliver, and David Byrne. Most of the directors I've worked with had a sense of humor, different types of senses of humor. Some more ironic and some more direct. But you look at Terry's film and think, so serious a man, and he was a football fan and a man of the world who had a great sense of humor. Has a great sense of humor.
That's great. It's important to have a laugh, even though the world could be a pretty scary place sometimes. Edward Pressman, thank you very much for your time. One more question for you. Do you believe that cinema can reach its great heights once again?
I do. I think that the form of theatrical presentations of a film of 90, 120 minutes is something that people think is, going out of fashion because of attention spans. But I think just as the theater has survived thousands of years and can affect an audience today just as it did back in the times of the Greeks, I think film, if they're emotionally connecting and done well, will continue, even though other forms of media will, I'm sure, supplement the traditional feature, but I don't think it'll wipe it out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you.